And there are more. This is an administration that believes in arms control as if it were an element of theology. We're going to see a fissile material cutoff treaty, a treaty on the prevention of the arms race in outer space, efforts to strengthen how they consider strengthening the non-proliferation treaty, and something called innocuously the arms trade treaty, dealing with conventional weapons. The hidden agenda for many groups supporting that treaty has nothing to do with real conventional weapons being shipped internationally. It has to do with the limitation of the prohibition on the private ownership of firearms, and that is something all of us here need to keep our eye on and to watch as it comes forward. Now, I know I'm an old arms controller. I know that arms control terminology glazes people's eyes over, but I'm telling you, American national security rests on a strong nuclear umbrella. It rests on strong defenses. We cannot give in on any of these points. Second major thing coming from the Obama administration is the continued pursuit of what today is euphemistically called global governance. No more global government. They know that sets people off, so they've got other phrases they use. But many of these proposals will result in palpable reductions in American sovereignty and need to be resisted. And this is something that will have differences with our friends in Europe. We need to understand that. We in this country are sovereign, we the people. So when you hear the media and academics talk about the need to share sovereignty in a complex world, they're saying, you have too much control over your government. And you need to share some of that with international organizations. I don't need to say any more on that point, but let me just quote to you so that it's clear where this is coming from comments made by the new President of Europe, Herman Van Rompuy of the European Union, on November the 19th when he took office. Europeans take the presidency of Europe seriously, so I suppose we should. But anyway, Herman Van Rompuy said, and listen, this was before Copenhagen, but he said 2009, remember that epic year that the president talked about? 2009 is also the first year of global governance with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step toward the global management of our planet. Now, nobody in Europe laughed when their president said that. And it's important when you remember the adulation of one student after a speech the president made on his first European trip. He said, in awe in his voice, he sounds like a European. That's where the problem is. We're going to see more efforts on climate change. The collapse in Copenhagen has not discouraged the advocates. And, you know, this is something that we need to be concerned about, whatever you think about the extent of global warming, whatever the extent you think about its man-made causes, because the people who support the sorts of state control, state regulation, and international taxation that were being talked about in Copenhagen would advocate those same policies whether the problem was global warming, global cooling, or the Earth's temperature wasn't changing at all. This is a statist agenda we have to reject. The threats to American sovereignty are going to come in a variety of other areas as well. I foresee at some point that the president will find a way to once again sign the treaty creating the International Criminal Court. Secretary of State Clinton said last year that it was, and I quote, a great regret, but it is a fact we are not yet a signatory to the Rome Statute, which created the court. Again, in the Bush administration, we took the U.S. signature off that treaty, which was a direct threat to American sovereignty. It's something President Bush cared personally about. We obviously can't stop the president if he re-signs the treaty, But if he submits it to the Senate, this is another die-in-the-ditch issue for conservatives. That treaty needs to be defeated by the biggest majority that we can make. The president has made it clear he wants to see a lot more of American foreign policy run through the United Nations system, and he also wants to see the U.S. Perceived as more engaged internationally. So there are a lot of treaties out there that have withered for a long time. I think at the appropriate moment, the administration will make another effort to get them ratified by the Senate, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. You know, there's a theme here. In the United States, at our federal level and state level, we have dealt with questions of discrimination on the basis of disability and gender and a whole range of issues. We in this room would probably disagree over what the appropriate measures are. There'd be a broader disagreement within the American population as a whole. But you know what? As Americans, we are capable of passing our own laws on these subjects. You do not have to have a substantive position on these treaties or questions like the death penalty or anything else to say they are not matters for international negotiation. They are matters for democratically elected governments like ours to decide on our own. And then finally, I could go on with a lot of other examples, but finally one that I know is important is the threat of international taxes. Now, the UN and other international bureaucracies despise the American system where Congress has to appropriate money to pay our assessments and pay expenses of these organizations because Congress is so uncooperative. So they have looked for years to find ways to fund international organizations without having democratically elected representatives make decisions. Prime Minister Brown of the United Kingdom is proposing an international bank tax. The French have proposed taxes on international airline tickets. The whole point is, obviously, banks and airlines don't pay taxes. You pay taxes, and you would on bank transactions and the purchase of these tickets. It's to get a way of funding, whether it's the climate change organizations, the International Monetary Fund, the UN itself. These various taxes come in complex guises. They're often hidden. Whenever anybody identifies one of these taxes, it doesn't matter what the purpose is. It doesn't matter how grave the situation. Once the American people lose the ability to determine where they will be taxed, we have lost the revolution, my friends. So let me conclude. You know, many reporters ask the question, are we more secure today than we were a year ago? I don't have any trouble saying we weren't, but honestly, that's not the right question. The real question is if President Obama continues the kinds of policies he's been pursuing so far, the right question is how secure will we be 3 years from now compared to when he was inaugurated? And that is the most troubling aspect of all. What we need to do is keep up the debate for the next 3 years, not be distracted by other issues. We need a sustained, unremitting effort until 2012 when we can evaluate our presidential candidates based on their ability to defend our national security. And our message to President Obama in the meantime should be this: we will not let you reduce American sovereignty. We will not let you make America vulnerable. And as the President's oath of office says, we will prevail over all enemies, foreign and domestic. Thank you very much.